welcome to the SaaS Revolution Show. I'm your host, Alex Theuma, CEO and founder of SaaStock. Delighted to be joined today by Werner Schmidt, who's the CEO and co-founder of Lative. Welcome, Werner.
Hi, Alex, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, great to have you on the podcast. Whereabouts are you today?
Great. Alex, I'm actually in Barcelona in Spain. I'm with my co-founder, Lative. It's so good to be spending some time here with the development team.
Oh, very cool. So you're not there on holiday. The development team are in Barcelona.
Yeah, exactly. So we've set up our development team out of Barcelona. That's where my co-founder, Lative, is based. And then I'm actually based in Dublin, in Ireland. So that's where we have our sales and go-to-market function out of.
Very cool. And so Werner, like I mentioned, you're the CEO and co-founder of Lative. But before we go into a little bit about Lative and maybe the founding story, can you tell us a little bit about who you are as a person? Who is Werner Schmidt?
Yes, so I've been on a bit of a journey. I've been in SaaS businesses for 20 plus years now, mostly Californian software companies. I got the opportunity to work for some of the fastest growing SaaS companies over my career, and predominantly in revenue operations and enablement. So really enabling sales organizations to be more efficient, more effective, and leveraging all the technology that's out there to be able to do that. So the goal was always having great and high growth sales teams, but also more importantly over the last few years is efficient and sales teams so that we grow efficiently. So that's really been my my past 2 decades.
Very cool. So long in SaaS and now running your own SaaS company and not a Californian Silicon Valley SaaS company. Why did you make the leap? And what is the founding story of Lative?
Yeah, so thanks, Alex. It's interesting because over my career, it's always been about making sales teams more efficient and how do we do more with less. But really, we also come from this period of just hyper growth, just grow, and just hire more salespeople, and we'll get to the numbers. And it's just the nature of the beast, I suppose, over the last 2 decades, and that started to shift, and I really noticed it. And before we founded Lative, in a more recent role when I was at Sage, where we would put in all this enablement and what we're trying to measure is how do you see what the impact is? How do you see the impact if we deploy Salesforce? And how do you see the impact if we put an expensive onboarding program in, or a skills program? And it just brought me back to a long time in revenue operations, and trying to figure out are what we're doing within the organization actually helping and improving productivity. And that led us into Lative, is that, well, how can we measure the impact of productivity in real time? How can we see what we're doing, all the decisions that we're making? And when we looked around, it was very difficult to find any technology that could do this. And we then took the leap and said, well, actually, let's build this, because it was out of pure frustration of having to manually do all these calculations on productivity. Because what's fundamental to this, Alex, is that we've got to build accurate capacity plans. And if we don't understand the productivity and be able to see that in real time, then how are organizations actually building accurate sales capacity plans? So that's really how we came about, taking the big giant leap into founding Lative and building a technology that's going to help organizations.
Do you ever have this feeling? Like, I was 11 years in sales, selling other people's enterprise software products, and I had just a moment in time where it's like, I don't want to sell other people's products for the rest of my life. I want to sell something that I've built and created, and that was a real driver for me. Was there something kind of similar for you, like this entrepreneurial yearning? Obviously you identified a problem, but had you always wanted to be like an entrepreneur at some stage, or was it just that, hey, look, we've identified this problem and I'm gonna build it before somebody else does?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Alex. I go back to my original, when I first started my career, my first job was, running some, I won't believe this, but perfume shops that started from nothing. And I think, seeing that, being a very small entrepreneur then, of what you could create and then build, always excited me. And also I come from a family that are entrepreneurs as well. And I think when being in corporate for a long time, you get quite secure and so forth. So there was definitely a yearning to come back to it at some point, and saw this opportunity that would allow us to do it. But also being in organizations for a long time, and you learn a lot, and you realize that actually we could do, we'd like to do this ourselves, but also build our own culture, build our own company, the way we'd like to see it from what we've learned in our experiences. But also, really importantly, is that we really are very passionate and believe very strongly about the technology that we build, and is really going to help companies, help RevOps leaders like myself that have had to go through this pain for 20 years. And that was also a big draw card too. So a bit of both on it, and it really all came together that allowed us to make those decisions, to be here talking to you.
And what data can you share behind the company in terms of when you incorporated to where you are now? Revenue, like sort of any sort of metrics, like number of people, like growth rates. Have you raised? Are you bootstrapped? This sort of thing.
So we started. So I think first off, we were bootstrapped at the start. We got a little small check of 100K that actually just allowed us to then prove out, can we build the technology to do this, because it's really complex. And when we think about productivity to return on investment and how that then feeds a capacity planning model. So we then realized actually we do have something here. So we did go out, and we were fortunate enough at the beginning of last year to raise 1.5 million. It happened quite fast, I think, because the problem we're solving for is very clear. Everyone knows about it. It's just can you actually build the technology to do that? So that actually allowed us, that funding allowed us then to put a development team in place. And that's pretty much what we've been focused on. We've been very capital efficient, of course, so we need to be, given what we do. And we've put the majority of our resources into building the platform out. And really pleased to say, out of the 3 modules that we set out to do, we've now got capacity planning live, on top of the return on investment module, and on top of the productivity modules. And we put that all into the Salesforce App Exchange, so people can go trial it and download it, with very minimal time commitment from themselves. So for our size, that funding has allowed us to get to that. Our next stage now is to now really focus on the go-to-market. And of course, that's get some salespeople in to help me, build out our content and inbound side on the marketing, and all the good stuff that comes with that. And that's really will be the next phase of the business.
So you're doing founder-led sales at the moment?
Exactly, it's founder-led sales at the moment. I've got a couple of people helping me with an SDR and salesperson, but it's very much a very small team focused on it right now.
You mentioned Salesforce App Exchange there. Like, I guess it makes sense with the business that Lative is, but like, what are for those that are not on App Exchange, and I'm not trying to plug App Exchange here, but like, what is the benefit? What is the value? What value is it brought you sort of like directly?
Yes, for us, there's 2 parts to it, Alex. Is one, we always know, our background as well, especially Lara, has been deploying Salesforce into environments, and deployed it 3 times. I deployed it once, so we know the technology really well. And also the way Lative works is it sits on top of the CRM. So we went with Salesforce on the App Exchange just because of the configuration of what we get with that, the speed and the real time. And also just the ease. What we wanted to do was remove friction from an organization to switch Lative on. And the App Exchange gives us that capability. And also, if you look at where our ICP focus is a number of those companies are around Salesforce. Now, if you're not in Salesforce, we've architected Lative to also be able to plug into things like HubSpot or take manual data feeds, because we know organizations are set up quite differently, and sometimes businesses get acquired and they're on different CRMs. So Lative can connect to the others, but we are leading with the App Exchange. That certainly gives us the real-time capability, which then makes Lative even more valuable.
No, thanks for sharing that. And what are like just a couple of the biggest lessons that you've learned so far from incorporation of the business to now, that you can share with the audience?
Yes. So I think one of the first things that comes to mind is you got to, when you're a startup, there's a lot of people you can listen to and get feedback on, and there's always people that want to help. So I think it's the first is really listen, go out there, find people, talk to people. people have gone through this, joined, Alex, things like you're doing with SaaStock. We've learned so much from SaaStock. Honestly, it opened up eyes, but also it opened up a number of relationships that we built at the event, and events like that, or channels that you can talk with. LinkedIn is another great one as well. Meeting other people in similar situations to get those insights. I think number two, instinct. Go with your instinct. I know it's saying more from an entrepreneurial side, but also no one has all the answers. You grow and you learn in, especially when you're bringing out a new technology like we've done at Lative. There's a lot of education that happens. There's ways that we need to figure out how to position Lative because of all that it does. And sometimes you just got to fall back on your instinct to be able to do that, and then adjust and course correct if needed. And then third, prioritization. I know, Alex, you know this well, but you've got to prioritize. There's so much to do, and as we've got bigger and we've grown, and the platform starts to build out, there's just more and more things that need to be done, and you get pulled left, right, and center. And what we're realizing is what can we prioritize that's actually going to make a difference tomorrow, and it is this ruthless prioritization that needs to happen.
Great lessons there. Appreciate you sharing those. And so what we really kind of want to talk about was, we've seen this big trend, I would say, what is it, maybe the last year, maybe 18 months, from moving from growth at all costs, which was, the 20 years sort of mantra, to revenue efficiency, right? I think with that revenue efficiency, and obviously what Lative does, that should be a good moment in time, for you guys. But outside of the product, like, what is your viewpoint on this movement to revenue efficiency? And what do you think about and mean by revenue efficiency?
Yeah, so I think for me, revenue efficiency focuses on four core pieces, but why? And I think, Alex, what's important is we really have come from 2 decades of growth at all costs. I mean, we've all been in positions where it's okay. It really was just hire more people. And it's the almost the basics of accounting almost sometimes we're just forgotten, right? Well, what did that cost? What does it cost to generate what we're doing? And this is, back to this reason why we founded Lative. It was out of that frustration of not being able to measure what is the actual productivity of what the sales team's generating, because it is so complex. There's so many data movements with salespeople coming and going. So when we think about revenue efficiency, well, revenue efficiency for me is made up of 4 core components. One is going to be, what's the productivity of what the sales team actually generates, and what's the average per person over a unit of time. Secondly, we really need to understand what are the ramp times of salespeople, right? So how long does it take for a new hire to come on board to then be at the average productivity? And because if you think about enablement functions, the amount of investment that goes into them, for onboarding programs, for skills programs, and so product training and learning and enablement. There's a lot of investment from companies into this. So why aren't we measuring it on a daily basis? And that's because, again, it's just so complex to calculate. So that over my career, absolutely productivity. Number 2, what are the ramp times? And then 3, leading into return on investment. And this is what I meant by getting back to basics. And that's just being efficient, right? So if we're going to generate $10 million, but if we're going to spend 12, well, that's not a good return on investment. In the past, it didn't matter because it was all growth at all costs. But now that really does matter. And it always should matter. It just found itself on the sideline. So again, how do I see what my return on investment is for what I'm generating versus what I'm cost? But not just at a high level. How do I see that across the dimensions within the business? How do I see that against new business, renewal business? How do I see that against verticals maybe, or even product lines? You need to be able to see that, because ultimately that helps where we invest the next set of dollars. And then that leads into number 4, the holy grail, right? All those key data points then feed the capacity planning model. How do I now build the capacity planning model that is accurate? And this is what organizations, every organization's doing it, and we got to do it. And unfortunately, the way it is done today, it's all being done manually. And that's why we've got a lot of guesswork that's happening, because these calculations, as I mentioned, are complex, but they've got to feed a model, and that model looks into the future of what we expect to do. So if we've got guessworks and we've got data that's not completely up to date, that tends to lead to these inaccurate capacity plans. And that's why the revenue efficient and building revenue efficient capacity plans is just crucial. And that really is the next stage of where we all as organizations need to go.
So tell me, like, we've obviously all got sales teams. We want them to be productive. We want to get ROI from them. What are a couple of things that we can do to get, the most ROI from the sales teams that we have today?
Yeah, so I think, look, it's again back to those key points on revenue efficiency. It's being able to look at those in a granular detail, understanding what teams are more productive than others, and look, and do I need to pull back some in one area and invest in others? Return. I think I always think when Alex is thinking about that question, what comes immediately to mind is just return on investment, right? If I'm looking at the return on investment and I'm seeing something like the SMB segment's not performing, well, then we should be making a decision then to maybe then say, well, let's shut down on the SMB segment and let's rather focus on mid-market and enterprise. But if you can't have the visibility into that, then it's very difficult to make those decisions. So my advice is really to start looking at that data, even if just get figure out what the revenue is, measure it against your dimensions, bring some costs in, your costs in to then see your ROI and start to look at that data. Don't look at it once a quarter or once a half a year, or maybe sometimes even once a year. A lot of businesses are still doing it. We should be looking at that stuff weekly, because what that allows us to do is to start seeing the decisions we're making. What's the impact of those decisions, instead of wait until the end of the quarter or wait until the annual planning exercise. So that's that. Because Alex, just to end off on that, what's really important about it, it's the cost of what it's costing organizations today for not doing anything about it, because there's a substantial cost when we overhire or underhire, the impacted productivity and so forth.
And what about in terms of ramp up times, for a salesperson? So is there, like, I guess maybe depending on role, like an industry sort of benchmark? I mean, I kind of want to say that, I've seen or heard that you should at least expect maybe like 6 months to get, a salesperson kind of fully ramped, but maybe is that dependent by role? And another kind of like part to the question then, like, is there, what are the things that we can do to, speed up that ramp up time? And if somebody is not ramping up within that period, is that you just decide, okay, they're gone and cut them and you have to go again? What are your thoughts around that?
And this is why I touch, and because there's so much investment from a company into this too. But onboarding programs, they are absolutely key. Just-in-time learning. There are great platforms out there that help with onboarding to make it repeatable and actually learn and see what's working and what's not.
Yeah.
But it is key, right? And the thing is, it's analyzing those onboarding programs down to a granular level so that day by day what is happening. Because like you just said, right, what's the ramp time? 6 months. That's what we need to get to. Well, is it 180 days? Is it 190 days? Is it 175 days? We don't. A lot of organizations don't really know. We just sort of go, well, it's 6 months or it's 4 months, but what should be the ideal number of days to ramp a salesperson from when they start to average productivity? But also we need to look at it by, is it new business? Is it renewal business? Is it mid-market? Is it enterprise or SMB? Because that also, like you say, it changes the amount of time that needs to be happened. So a lot of focus needs to be put into it. So my advice to any organization is really look at your onboarding programs, look at it in a very granular detail on a day-by-day basis of what the sales individual is going to go through, not only for building improving the ramp times, but it's also building a great culture. Because I've seen a lot of times when you bring sales people into the organization at the start and the onboarding just gets messed up. And by that, you lose the salesperson and it's so hard to then, fix things and bring it back. So there needs to be a lot of emphasis put onto this and really being able to measure it at a granular level.
Do you think growth at all costs will come back, or revenue efficiency is here to stay?
Yeah, well, obviously for Lative, we hope revenue efficiency is here to stay because it's good practice and it should just always be being done. But I do think, it's the nature of the beast that it will start to probably come back in some shape or form. But I hope it'll be in a far more structured way than what we've had to deal with in the past. Because seeing what's happened in the last year and a half and the number of people and they, not just people, but the families and so on being impacted it's really hard to read it all sometimes. And I think that's why, just as us and professionals in businesses, we do need to be a far more, cautious of what we spend versus what we generate, being way more on top of the decisions that we're making and seeing the impact of they are. And now there's technologies be able to do this and help organizations and remove that guesswork. And that's why I fall back onto it. It's really important. And I think this will be in the future, is that we're always going to build now revenue efficient capacity plans, because the data's there. We've got the technology now, and now we just need to start using it.
Makes sense. I'm going to move into the quick fire round now, Werner. So what one thing has moved the needle the most for you in your career?
Yeah, so two things. Back to listening, always a tough one, but I think delegation. It's always a tough one. You know, it's always easy to do things yourself because you can go faster, but it's not. I think over my career, I started to grow when I learned to really delegate, work as a team, listen. I know there's a few in there, but yeah, that was the big change when my career started to move the needle, started to grow.
It seems obvious. Not everybody, does that. The podcast I just recorded just before this, I think she mentioned that her first startup failed because they tried to do everything and didn't delegate. So definitely some commonality around that and those lessons.
Yeah.
What about the best advice you've ever received?
So best advice I ever received. Well, don't get into the food business.
Or perfume business?
Yeah, or perfume business. That didn't work out too well. Lots of good lessons learned. But food business, food goes off. But of course, there's a lot of good we got to eat. So stay in technology. But I think that's it stopped me from doing some other things I wanted to do. But I do think I fall back on this listen piece, right? I think it's important. It's very easy to just go and try to do things on your own. I think sometimes entrepreneurs are that way. They're just headstrong, let's go, and we'll figure out as we go. But I think there is an opportunity to sit back and just listen. That's helped me in my career too, and it's probably the best advice I got. And it's probably one of the hardest things to do as well.
What about biggest failure you've made, lesson learned?
Yeah, so I'd go back to that, not listening. I think we've made some mistakes along the way of that. But I think sometimes you just get caught up in what's going on and around you, and it's hard to sometimes reflect and just take maybe 30 take an hour or two a month just to go back and look at what are we doing. Are we aligned to what we said we're going to go do? And are we guided by the principles that we have underneath that, be it the values, we've got it Lative now, or even past values in past companies. And I think by doing that just helps avoid landing up in situations where you've just gone too far down the line and things fail. And I've been, hands up, I've made mistakes where it's caused impact to organizations, and because of strategic decisions we've made. And maybe sometimes if we're just taking a step back, reflected on where we were as a team, as an organization, we may not have landed up where we did. What
do you think the hardest thing about scaling in 2023 will be?
For what we're seeing really is the macro environment. It's not easy. It's not like people open their arms to say, let's just put some new tech in. Everyone's very cautious on what's being spent now. Need to be, of course. And I think that's going to take some time. And so I just don't see that changing, very fast in the near term. But I think things will ease off in time, of course. But for now, 23, I think that's the biggest issue, is the biggest issue. And really, money is expensive now. It's not what we've been used to for so long. And I think it's just the new norm that we've got to get used to.
You mentioned earlier in the show that you joined us at SaaStock in Dublin last year, and it was a helpful event for you. Maybe can you just share a little bit more? I mean, I thought I'll just seeing as you mentioned it, dive deeper and get a bit of cheeky plug, because we're probably less than 6 months away from SaaStock in Dublin. So yeah, what were some of the things that you got out of it?
Well, Alex, the first thing was just being immersed in a environment like that for 2 days with just other SaaS founders, other SaaS vendors, companies, the investors, all network, and the conversations we had were so rich. And honestly, that after that experience, it was 2 days. We also had a happy hour in between that, and got a bunch of people together. But everyone was talking so highly of the event, and it was just so nice to experience that and be part of it. There was just so much energy as you got into it. I mean, the hours just flew by. And we actually, that's why we signed up to Austin, and we'll be there in 2 weeks. And we already signed up to Dublin again, because it's so valuable. And I think just bringing, and not only just bringing everyone together under one roof, but it's the content of the speakers and the speakers that are there. You're always learning. I mean, I took so many notes and so many photos and videos of slides and so on throughout the 2 days. And of course, there was the founder piece on the first day actually that we did that was really helpful as well. So I know I couldn't talk highly enough of it, Alex. And honestly, thank you very much for founding it and putting it together, because it's certainly helped us. It's made us better, and we're looking forward to continuing to be part of it, like we're doing.
Oh, cool. No, I appreciate you sharing that. And where can people find you if they want to reach out to you, Werner? And where can they find Lative?
So LinkedIn, best place for it. If you can always find me on LinkedIn, just Werner Schmidt on LinkedIn, and also, of course, just search lative.io at the website, or Lative on LinkedIn. And please, it'd be great to get in touch. Always want to make new connections and network, share stories. And as mentioned, I want to listen and learn. So looking forward to connecting with people.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Well, Werner Schmidt, CEO of Lative, thank you so much for coming on the SaaS Revolution Show today, sharing your lessons with the SaaStock community. Really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you very much, Alex.